working, just let me know, Christopher. But let's wait like for whatever 10 more seconds. I think it's only 31, and people usually arrive a bit later, especially on Sundays. Everyone's still getting their breakfast. But yeah, let's just kick it off. Hi everyone, I'm Raf, and I'm the founder of Hyphen. And yeah, today I'm gonna tell you on the one hand side a bit more about how you and everyone will be able to land your dream job at your dream startup. But before I jump into this, I'm also quickly gonna introduce myself, and then I'm gonna run you through what I call the how to land your startup phases, in a sense. How to land your dream job in your startup phases, which will help you to secure exactly what you're here for today. So who am I? I'm Raf. I'm originally Austrian. I studied for my bachelor's at UCL in economics. After graduating from university in 2019, so yeah, 2.5 years ago, I worked both in a startup as a founder associate, as well as a consultant at McKinsey in the corporate. The startup I worked in was a startup called Matter in Copenhagen, which was a sustainability fintech. And I really enjoyed my time there. I was working on super impactful topics. I had like the feeling that on a daily basis, I had an impact and I learned a lot. But I just didn't know what I was really learning, to be completely frank and honest with you. Afterwards at McKinsey, I was working, to be completely frank and honest, on a bit less impactful topics sometimes. At least that's what my perception was, because the 100th appendix slide just sometimes doesn't really make the difference anymore. But what I had at McKinsey was this sort of amazing learning and development structure and opportunity around myself, where I was like in weekly or bi-weekly learning sessions together with my peers, my cohort of 80 other people. And this was just like amazing. So I thought, why can't we combine the best of both worlds? Meaning working on super impactful stuff in the startup space, but having the learning and development structure and the career path and the opportunities of the corporate space. And that's exactly why we founded Hyphen. But let me go into this like a bit later. And if anyone has any questions, I think Christopher is going to help me like after do like this sort of 10-minute, how to get into this, how to land your dream job into the startup. We're going to have a Q&A session. So if you already have questions now, I think just drop them into the chat function and Christopher will pick them up and then we can answer them later. So how do you land your dream job? I have kind of like 5 phases, which will help you and everyone here to land your dream job in a startup. Let me run through the phases first. The first phase is the discovery phase, where you need to find out what you want to do, where you want to do it. The second phase is the so-called reach out phase. That's basically the first time you're going to interact with your dream startup. The third stage is the third phase is the so-called application phase. In the application phase, you basically need to stand out from all the other applicants. The fourth phase is the interview phase, and the fifth phase is what I call the negotiation phase, because you also need to be aware about how much you're worth, in a sense, like how valuable you are to the startup. Let me jump into the discovery phase. What's the discovery phase? As already mentioned, here it's all about finding out what you really want to do. And I typically split this into 3 sections: finding out what role you want to do, finding out what industry you want to work in, and finding out what type of startup you want to work in. What do I mean with all of this? Finding out what role. Roles are typically split into non-technical and technical roles. Typically, like especially for you guys who are graduates from bachelor's, master's, or PhDs, or even like early career professionals, your role is pretty much destined to be, in a sense. What do I mean with that? I mean, hey, you study probably like management or marketing, or you study computer science at university. It's very easy to get then from this sort of route into the startup space. Once you're in the startup, you can then develop into other roles. So that's about finding out the role. But non-technical and technical is not really the job description you see in startups. Typically, you have like a wide variety. For example, in a non-technical space, you have everything from operations, growth, business analytics, business intelligence, generalists, etc. In the technical space, you have everything from a classical software engineer to a data scientist, to a product designer, to a product manager. And for you, it's extremely important that you really figure out what you want to do and how you want to do it. How do you go about this? The best thing is speaking with people who do those roles in the startups and just figuring out what their day-to-day job looks like. On a side note, like we with Hyphen also developing right now a blog series where we're really interviewing a lot of people in those different roles and really figuring out what does it mean to work in operations in an early stage startup. And yeah, so check out our website in the coming weeks, and we'll make sure that you get to understand what the different roles are. Secondly, it's all about the industry. Industry is something which I think is extremely important, because the industry is the why. Why are you so passionate about the startup space? Why are you so passionate about working in this startup? And usually the typical industries are, yeah, there are thousands of different industries, but let's pick out a few of them today. For example, healthcare or health tech, climate tech, fintech, etc. Those industries basically give you a bit of understanding. Like if you decide on one of those industries, you not only tell us or tell yourself that why you're so motivated about it. What do I mean with this? I personally believe that if you end up working in a startup, you need to be aligned with the purpose, with the vision. A lot of people in these days, they are really frustrated by big corporations not doing anything against climate change. That's why so many people join like Climatetech startups in these days, and that's exactly an industry. Other people are frustrated by banks not democratizing like financial service industries. That's why they join fintechs in these days. So really make sure that you understand what you're passionate about, why you're doing this, and then based upon this, choose the industry. Don't go. I personally, I'm not a big believer of going like with a startup first and then basically trying to match it in your industry. Really figure out like what you're really passionate about. Of course, there are always exceptions. Maybe you have the amazing opportunity of joining like an early stage startup who just received like millions of fundings, and you just want to be there to learn. That's of course an option as well. But if you're there for the long run, really make sure that you work on topics that intrigue you, that interest you. Because ultimately, you need to wake up in the morning and need to work on something you actually care about in order to really produce like amazing output. Then finally, what type of startups? What do I mean with that? Type of startups are usually classified or categorized into funding stages, like angel, pre-seed, seed, series A, B, C, D, up to unicorn. Funding stages usually correlate like with amount of employees, with like to what extent they are really like professional setup companies in a sense, which means like there's less of this sort of ups and downs in the early stage startup space. And it's really important that you're aware what you want. If you join like a really early stage startup, first of all, like the salary is going to be lower as well, usually. And it also means that you're going to have a lot of ups and downs, and literally people just going to throw stuff to you and you need to deal with it. Whilst that's amazing for some people, it's not the right thing for everyone. That's why I really encourage people to really figure out what do you want to get out of it. Do you want to have like a bit of a just learn everything experience, then join a very early stage startup? But be aware that this is going to be very stressful. If you want to have a bit more like a not relaxed, but a bit more structured experience, join a Series A, Series B, Series D startup. Then you're going to have a designated role straight from the beginning, and you can grow out of your role into different other areas. That's it about the discovery phase. So in a nutshell, to sum it up, it's very important that you understand the why. Why are you motivated by this? Why do you want to work on this? And why you think you have the right skills in order to do that. Second phase is the what I call reach out phase. In the reach out phase, it's very important that you reach out to people in those sort of different roles, industries, and types of startups. I know this sounds always like very easy, and it's harder than it actually is. Like networking is, in my opinion, just like network is, in my opinion, quite a bullshit answer, and that's why you should really, how to say, like, it's very important that you just get started, but don't be like frustrated if people not answering your emails, your WhatsApp messages, your LinkedIn messages. Everyone is super busy. And even when I, after university, I was quite well connected in the startup space. And I was really struggling to find like the right startup for myself as well, because I didn't have the transparency. I didn't have the understanding of the different roles, industries, types of startups, and what I really wanted. So don't be frustrated by this sort of process, and it's very tedious, but if you go for it, it will help you ultimately, because you will find the best role in the best industry in the best type of startup. And that's also like something we are tackling like here with Hyphen, because what we do is basically we are organized a bit like not like a union for startups, but in a sense we understand all the different startups in the space. We understand what they have to offer, and we understand what you want. And that's basically one aspect of our offering, which means like we match you up in a sense like with the right startup. But we can go into that like later as well. Then after you have basically understood like really and confirmed what you're interested in the reach out phase, it's all about the application phase. And in the application phase, I can tell you the thing that makes you stand out from all the other applicants is if you already have done some of the work you're going to be doing. What do I mean with this? Not that you have some sort of past experience with this. If you, let's say, hypothetically apply for a fintech startup in some sort of particular B2B, let's say SaaS space, then it's going to be very important if you apply there that you really understand the market and you really understand the current challenges the startup might be having in the role you're applying for. Because if you already show this sort of understanding in your application, then they see, hey, wow, this person actually has thought about it. This person knows what our big problems are. And this person might be even able to add value from day one to us. And that's exactly what you want. For example, yesterday, I received an application for Hyphen for a woman for a product lead. She did a lot of amazing research beforehand before she applied to us, because in the email and the application she sent over to me, she clearly indicated not only like what our major pain points are, and I haven't told pretty much anyone about, I haven't told, no, I didn't tell anyone about our pain points, but she, like, even from an external perspective, did the legwork, did the research, and figured really out like what the problem space and what the issues in the space where we are in right now are. And she came up with actionable with actions, basically how we could overcome them together, and whether I would have some time to let her explain her thoughts in a sense. And I was just like mesmerized, because this clearly shows like not only, hey, this person first of all just didn't like shoot out like 1,000 applications, because I can also tell you the startup space works a bit different. It's not about quantity, it's about quality of applications, and that's going to make you stand out as well. And yeah, that's in a nutshell about the application phase. So really make sure that you do your research, really make sure that you understand the startup and you understand the industry, and really make sure that ideally you come with actionable with actions, basically what they could do or what you think like the next steps for them could be, in a sense. Because this really is something that everyone loves, because everyone loves external thoughts who are good. No one likes external thoughts who are just like some sort of random bullshit you could find on any Reddit feed, in a sense. The fourth phase is what we call the interview phase. Just give me a second. In the interview phase, I can tell you it's very important that you are just like humble, be personal, show like who you are as a person, and don't trying to be like this sort of, hey, I've done everything in my life, I'm the best person ever. Show like who you are. Ask very good questions. That's what I always love as well. And that's also when we speak, for example, when I'm personally right now speaking with venture capital funds who would like to work together in order to make our venture even bigger. The ones I personally prefer the most are the ones who ask like really tricky questions, like the ones I'm barely able to answer, because it shows you they really thought about it and they know the biggest questions. And it's not usually for them, if you don't have the answer straight away, it's not a bad thing. Same if you ask like really good questions to the startups, and if they might not have the answer, then that's the best thing that can happen to you as well, because it really shows, hey, wow, this person asked a question, I have no answer. Maybe this person has more to offer with regards to that as well. Then secondly, about being like humble and asking good questions, it's all about, as I already quickly mentioned at the beginning, telling your story. Show your entrepreneurial drive. Show what initiatives you did outside university in order to stand out from the other people. What do I mean with that? What I personally always love to see is, I don't care about your grades, to be completely frank and honest. What I want to see is to what extent you have been engaged outside your studies. Everyone studies. Everyone here, like who is at university, is smart enough to get good grades if they put in the hours. But what differentiates the best from everyone is like to what extent they have been engaged in extracurricular activities. Did they set up a charity? Did they set up a society? Were they running like, did they start like a startup and already made like a few hundred or a few $1,000s of revenue? That's exactly what the people want to see. That doesn't mean now that you now need to go and run and set up something fictional. Usually, if you think about all the things you did like in the past 2-3 years, most of the time there are some exceptional stories. So what I would recommend is, for the interview phase, really go a bit like into your personal life, your personal journey, and figuring out like phases where you show like entrepreneurial drive, where you show like how you solve problems, where you show like how you had to collaborate with others, and all those stories basically not make them up, but basically write them down, and basically and be ready to tell those stories if you're requested to do so. And then the final phase, if everything works out, it's basically the negotiation phase. What I personally always like the most as well is if a person, of course, they shouldn't ask for ridiculous like salaries or equity share options, because that just again tells you that this person has no idea what's like the benchmark, or in a sense. But if I offer like a salary, and the other person realizes that he or she or they are much more worth to the company than I thought, then I'm more than happy to negotiate a salary that's exactly aligned like with the work you're going to be doing, and also like the amount of effort you need to put in. So be ready to know like what's your worth and how much you're worth, and then negotiate for it. There's no harm in doing so. It's negotiations are part of every business, and it's very important that you become really good at them. That's pretty much it. And I mean, then if everything works out, you're going to start working at the startup. But that's like a different story. And I'm more than happy to chat about this like in the next couple of 10 to 15 minutes as well. Because like what we at Hyphen are doing is exactly not only helping you find like your startup job by matching you with the right startups, when you start working full-time there, you're also going to be enrolled in our 12-month-long role-specific and industry-specific training programs where you get taught the skills. You usually only get taught like in the corporate space, because in the startup, no one ever has time. So that's why we basically would put you in a structured learning program for up to 12 months, where you would learn together with other peers who start at the same time as you in a different startup in the same role. And together you build like the sort of class and community feeling you would usually only have in the corporate space. That's pretty much what we do. And and that's pretty much also like how you land your dream job in a startup. But let me quickly recap and summarize it again. First phase, discovery phase. Find out what, why, and how you want to do it. Second phase is the reach out phase. Confirm your choices. Confirm if the role you think is the right for you, if the industry, and if the type of startup. The third phase is the application phase. Do the legwork, do the research, really try to stand out in the application and think about what value you could add basically from day one. The fourth phase is the interview phase. That's all about being like humble, being yourself, asking the right questions, showing them that you are street smart, showing them that you can do the work. And the fifth phase, in order to really, establish like your credibility, negotiate. But again, don't come up with a ridiculous offer. If they're already offering you like, let's say 50, 55, 50K salary, don't negotiate more. That's a lot. But therefore you need to do your research beforehand in order to understand how much you're basically worth in that sense. That's it. So I hope that all of you guys can or will take basically this sort of opportunity we're having in right now, meaning that the startup space is booming. More and more money is basically getting invested into startups, and the industry is just like in general, probably in my opinion, the most excited to get into straight out of university, because you will learn everything there. You will not only learn everything there, you will work on topics that you passionately care about, and that's something that's very rare in other sort of industries in these days. So take a leap of faith, and excited to see your applications coming through.
I see we have quite a few of questions from the audience, and thanks so much, Raphael. As you mentioned, startups give you exposure to so many different things that you can do, as opposed to just one specific thing that you would do on, let's say, corporate internship. So that's amazing. So I see we have quite a few questions. One comes from a guy who asks, how should you deal with due diligencing the startup you're interested in? What questions are good to ask when assessing whether a startup is good for you?
Let me address the first question first. How you should do the due diligencing. The due diligencing is, of course, only something you do once you have like an offer on the table or something like this. And how you go about this is you look up like ideally like current, but also like ideally past employees of the company. And that's something very easy to find on LinkedIn in these days. Then if I would be you, just reach out to them and ask them, hey, I have an offer. Could we quickly jump like on the 5-minute chat? Could I ask you like a couple of questions in order to help me to identify whether I should take the offer or not? So that's pretty much how you do due diligence in these days. Sometimes it even makes sense that you ask like the founder of the company you're interviewing for, or like whoever interviewed you for, if they could introduce you to some past employees in order to tell you that story. So usually what you do is exactly what I just said in the end, like you ask for some sort of references who you could reach out to. But in addition to this, it's also important that you do your own work and reach out to people who they don't refer you to, because those might be the ones where something didn't work out that well. And it's super important for you to have both spectrums of the space. What was the second question again? Sorry, Christopher.
So the second question was, what questions are good to ask when assessing whether a startup is good for you?
I mean, what I personally like, if I would be you, Guy, what I would ask is exactly like, what sort of additional learning and development can you give me in addition to basically the daily work I'm going to be doing? Because every startup, you're going to learn a lot on the job. But I think what people should optimize for, and what more and more of you guys are optimizing for as well, is exactly this sort of learning and development. We are here to learn. You want to grow. In order to grow, you need to have this sort of structure around. So that's definitely the questions I would ask, like, how is this dealt with at the startup? Is it basically everyone says, hey, we have a learning budget and we do this, but no one really does it? Then that's basically, in my opinion, not a red flag, but it's something you should pay attention to. And I mean, I know it. We are struggling as well as on our startup, and that's just like how it is. But it requires both like pushes from both founders and executives, but also like employees. So ask questions around this, but also ask exactly like easy stuff. Hey, how is the feedback culture? How's the general culture? Do we go like for food? Do we grab like dinner? Do we grab like lunch? Do we grab breakfast? Or is it basically just like a really, how to say, like a working culture where we're just there from 9 to 6 or 9 to 5, and then everyone goes home and no one really interacts with anyone anymore? And those are a bit like the questions I would ask. But Guy, please do reach out to me, and I can send you over like a thorough list of questions if you want.
Perfect. We have another question from Krisha. Guys, feel free to type in more questions in the chat. Krisha asks, in terms of application, how do you want interest and knowledge to be shown? Is it through your CV or verbally during the process and the interview, or both?
I think in the CV, it's a bit like hard to show like the interest, because I wouldn't really recommend that you tailor your CV to every sort of startup. Create a general CV. It's not worth the effort. And then in the application, most startups either have like a sort of cover letter submission form or something else. You can then basically show your interest there. And if they don't have this, then don't hesitate to reach out to the person directly with an email where you basically say why you're so interested and why you're so passionate about this.
Cool. And we have a great question here. As a startup's internal company culture is still developing, how do you select the best bet? How do you judge the culture as an outsider?
That's a really good question. And I think that's also one of the most, how to say, like difficult ones to assess, because in order to really understand the culture, you need to be immersed in the company like for a couple of weeks or months. So if I would be you, like Mahaprasad, what I would be doing is exactly like reaching out to both current employees, but also ideally like previous employees. It's a bit like a due diligence process, and really trying to understand like what culture means for them. Because there's a saying on an idiom like in English, which is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think I completely agree. If the culture is not right in a company, like the company is not going to succeed. And culture can be everything from feedback culture, in a sense, can be everything from helping each other out culture, can be everything like that we have like whatever bi-monthly or like every 3 months like an offsite or something like this. All those things are super important. And if I would be you, I will come up like with some sort of list of things you want to see, in a sense, exactly like, hey, feedback. I have a manager. We have like weekly team dinners. We have like offsites, etc. And then basically based up on this list, literally have like a bit of a checklist, and then assess like how it's done right now. And then based up on this, make your best bet. But ultimately, you need to trust your gut instinct, because usually that's the right thing. If you have like a really good conversation with someone, then also like it's quite replicable to how the culture basically is in that sort of startup.
Cool. Another question is, most of us are in the UK and London, and still a lot of students want to follow the corporate path and either join investment banking or consulting. Why should students choose startups instead?
Yeah, really good question. And I think why students should choose startups instead is like straight out of university, that there will be like the way that you can go from startups into corporates like in 2 to 3 years as well. That wasn't the case like 3 years ago, but more and more we can see this. I, for example, if I don't like my work in a startup space, I could potentially always go back again into the corporate space, whether that was a McKinsey or like some sort of investment bank, because they all need people like this from the startup space. They all need to innovate themselves, which means like there is not anymore this sort of, hey, you start off in a corporate and then go into the startup. This is changing. There is like now this way of where you start off in a startup and then go into the corporate, because you really need it there as well. So that's why I encourage people, really follow your passion from day one and do what you want to be in the end. When I had to make the decision whether I'm going to quit McKinsey to pursue like my journey like here at Hyphen or not, someone told me that if you want to learn surfing, you need to surf and you don't watch other people surf. So if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to work like become like a whatever chief marketing officer, you need to do the thing and not watch other people doing it. And that's the best advice I can give you.
And that's the same exact advice that Michael Seibel gave at Seedry last year. So great minds think alike.
I mean, I'm definitely not like Michael Seibel, but I'm happy to hear that.
Cool. We have one more question from Guy. Again, in your experience, Raphael, what are some of the things students interested in startups spend too much of their time on during university?
Exams and grades. To be completely honest, like as I said, I mean, exams are important, grades are important, but get a 2-1 or something like this, and then you're gonna be fine. I've never really anyone shown my grades from university, and no one really cares. What people care about are your skills and what you can do. This is going to drastically change in the next 2 to 3 years as well. Like we, for example, here at Hyphen, we're developing like skill matrix, which tell us like how good you are at the beginning when you're going to start working in a startup, and also where you're going to be like after 1 year. And that's exactly what future employers going to look for. They look for what can you do, what are you capable of, and not like what grade you got like when you were like 18 or 19 at university. I mean, if you want to become an academic, like or researcher PhD, for example, like my girlfriend wants to become, then it's very important that you pay attention to this. But if you say like, hey, this is a no-go, I don't want to do that anyway, then focus on the essential stuff. Don't, of course, like go still to classes, like still write your exams, and but focus exactly like on the essentials, and focus on building like your network. Don't try to just like do your own thing at university. Try to meet up with as many people as possible, because your network ultimately is also like quite a bit of a proxy how easy things gonna be for you in the startup space afterwards. And yeah, that's the advice I can give.
Cool. And one last question from Courage. Or actually, yeah, two more questions. So Courage asks, hi, I'm studying waste and clean technologies, and I'm interested in climate tech, but I don't have idea of software development. What do you advise?
That's no problem, because I think even though it's called Climatetech, it doesn't necessarily imply that you need to have like a software development or software engineering background. So Climatetech is just like an industry. In Climatetech, there are startups who need everything. Like they need a business analysts, they need people in operations, they need people in growth, they need people in software engineering. And if you have a background like this, like waste and clean technologies, then you're perfectly equipped for a job in this sort of industry. And yeah, just like probably not like the right person for being a software developer there, but that's not a big issue.
Cool. And the last question from Joanna or Joanna. How is Hyphen different from the many other schools out there, like Leewagon?
Les Wagons, for example, what they do is they reskill you, Joanna. You probably like, I'm not sure what you studied, but let's say you studied politics. I mean, I'm sorry if I'm like making the wrong assumption here right now. But what Les Wagons does, they teach you like software engineering skills or data science skills before you even start working somewhere. You basically pay upfront yourself the fee, and then you end up working, then you pay back your debt in a sense. What we at Hyphen do is that we don't reskill you, we upskill you. We take you, Joanna, and we basically match you with a startup where you're going to start working full-time. You're getting a full-time salary from day one. And next to working full-time, we upskill you, and the upskilling is paid by the employer, which means like you personally, you only benefit. You get a salary, you work in a super cool startup, and you get the training delivered by us in a sense. So there's no sort of it's no catfish. Honestly, it works because we personally think that startups and corporates are the ones basically who need to start paying like for the training in a sense, and that's exactly what we are trying to do here. And yeah, it's a win-win for everyone. Startups get access to the best talents, students get access to the best companies, and everyone basically learns together in a sense and delivers the best output.
Perfect. And I said it was the last question, but Mahaprasad asked an amazing question again. So we have to answer that. Most of the early stage startup employees have ambition to starting their own startup someday. What kind of founder leadership should such candidate look for?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, you of course like look for someone who went through a similar journey. Like for example, the best if you wanna start up, if you wanna be a founder yourself at one point, then I can give you the advice that you should join a startup, like an early stage one as a generalist, or like as a founder associate, because there you will be doing everything. You will be doing marketing, you will be doing operations, you will be doing like hiring, etc. And it really gives you like this sort of full stack business skills. But again, that means that you will probably not make like as much money as you could make if you join like a later stage company at that point. So it's again like a sacrifice. And for what kind of founder leadership such a candidate should look like, look for someone you can learn a lot from, someone who has done it before, someone who has whatever worked in startups for 5 to 10 years beforehand, who really understands it. Because what you need is you need someone who gives you continuously feedback, who questions you. If you work together with someone who's like straight out of university themselves as well, then it's going to be really tough for you to learn a lot. So definitely look for an experienced founder who you can learn a lot, and you can basically like sit next to each other and and get like instant and continuous feedback.
Yeah, I think that's the ideal case scenario where you work for a repeat founder that started something successful before, and now he starts something new from scratch, and you get the chance to be part of this early team and work with him even one-on-one. That's like the ideal opportunity to learn. But yeah, thanks so much, Raphael. It's been very, very useful. I see we have great feedback from students and attendees here, and thanks so much for partnering with us at Seedery.
I appreciate it, and amazing job, everyone, and you especially, like Christopher and Daniel, and like the entire team from Seedery. And happy to see all of you guys like later today in the evening at King's College, where we're going to be there with the stall as well. So if you have any questions, drop by, and yeah, excited to see.
Cool, thanks.